You think you're in control, don't you? Of your relationships, your plans, your emotions. But what if I told you control is the very thing keeping you trapped? In The Art of Letting Go, Trenton exposes the truth. Freedom doesn't come from holding on tighter. It comes from finally loosening your grip. Hello, everyone. Hi, all, and welcome to BookPodCastZone. We are really excited today to get into this material. We're here for a true deep dive, and this is specifically for you, the learner who's looking for that accelerated understanding.
That's right. We know you're busy. You need information efficiently, but also thoroughly. You don't want to feel overwhelmed. You just want the core insights, the practical takeaways.
Exactly. So we're aiming to provide that critical path, that shortcut, through Trenton's incredibly relevant work, The Art of Letting Go. It's a book that's resonated with so many people, and for good reason.
And our mission today, it isn't just about giving you a chapter summary. You can find that anywhere. We want to really extract the mechanisms behind the emotional transformation he describes. How does this actually work?
Right. How do you do it? So we've structured this whole deep dive around 5 major themes. You could call them the conceptual episodes of the book. And these really show the practical steps you can take toward releasing that weight.
Yeah, the weight of anxiety, definitely, but also regret. That constant need we feel to police our own thoughts and feelings, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And we're really focusing on what Trenton calls these genuine quiet victories. This isn't about, like, huge dramatic life overhauls overnight. It's about shifting your inner world.
Moving away from that feeling of exhaustion, right? That high-tension pursuit of perfection, that voice that says, if I just try harder, if I just grip tighter, then things will fall into place.
Which is such a trap.
Yeah.
And instead, moving towards this more expansive, sustainable kind of peace. And the key, as Trenton argues, is that it comes from strategically letting go. It's an active process.
And that word strategic is so important here. This isn't about giving up or being passive. Trenton's book is almost like a manual, really, for reclaiming your power, your energy, especially in a world that just feels so noisy sometimes.
Information overload, constant demands. It feels like we're pulled in a million directions.
Totally. So this is about transforming those chronic everyday struggles, the worry, the frustration, the self-criticism, into actual resilience and ultimately a more lasting sense of calm.
Okay, let's dive into the first part then. So the journey really kicks off by tackling the thing we often cling to the most desperately.
Yeah.
Control. Chapter 1 is this really powerful invitation to stop seeing your mind as this constant battlefield.
Yeah, the endless internal arguments, the what-ifs, the replaying conversations, it's exhausting.
Totally. And Trenton's promise here, right at the start, is the possibility of instant relief. And it comes from understanding this foundational idea, the dichotomy of control.
This concept is like the ignition key for the whole process. It's where Trenton just flips the script on our modern obsession with needing to fix or manage or influence absolutely everything around us, and within us, too.
And he argues that so much of our immediate pain, the anxiety, the frustration, that churning feeling comes directly from pouring, like 90% of our energy into stuff that is fundamentally outside our ability to change.
Precisely. We invest so much emotional capital, so much mental energy into things that are, by their very nature, uncontrollable. And the result is just suffering. It's almost mathematical.
It feels so counterintuitive, though, doesn't it? Because we're constantly told, hustle harder, never give up, the person who tries the hardest wins. But here, Trenton is saying the most effective action is actually a kind of surrender.
But it has to be that strategic surrender, as you said. It's not apathy. It's about discernment. It's about drawing a very clear line in the sand.
Okay, so where is that line? How do you figure out what's actually yours to shape versus what just belongs to the universe or fate or circumstance, whatever you want to call it?
This is where Trenton brilliantly pulls from ancient wisdom, but makes it incredibly relevant for today. The dichotomy of control. It's essentially Stoicism 101. Thinkers like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. They built their whole philosophy around this.
Right, I've heard of them, but how does it apply now?
Well, Epictetus, for example, taught that our happiness and peace depend entirely on distinguishing between what is up to us and what is not up to us.
Okay, so what falls into each category?
Up to us is basically our inner world. Our judgments about things, our intentions, our choices, our actions, how we respond to events. That's our domain.
Our sphere of influence.
Exactly. And not up to us. That's pretty much everything else. Other people's opinions of you, whether they like you, whether they agree with you, global events, the economy, the weather, your physical health, to a large extent, someone else's decisions.
Well, that list is long. Much longer than the up to us list.
It usually is. And Epictetus argued that suffering is guaranteed the moment you confuse those two categories, the moment you try to exert control over something that is fundamentally not up to you.
And in our modern world, that confusion feels constant. The hustle culture you mentioned earlier pushes us to believe we can control outcomes, control perceptions, control everything if we just work hard enough.
And the digital age just amplifies it tenfold, doesn't it? We're bombarded with notifications, news alerts, social media feeds, metrics, all demanding an emotional response, often implying we have some power or responsibility to fix it all immediately.
Yeah, like you see a global crisis unfolding on the news, and there's this immediate anxiety, this feeling of, I should be doing something, even if the event is thousands of miles away and completely outside your personal influence.
Exactly. And the relief Trenton talks about comes from that powerful realization. You can actually step back. You can consciously choose not to take emotional responsibility for things you cannot control. And the feeling he describes, it's visceral.
He says it's like finally exhaling after holding your breath for, well, maybe years. Just this sudden release of tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. You stop chasing shadows, as he puts it.
Let's ground this in a really concrete, high-stakes U.S. example. Think about the stress around potential layoffs, especially in, say, the tech industry or other fields that feel volatile right now.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. So much uncertainty, so much anxiety floating around.
Right. So an employee hears rumors, the market looks shaky, maybe a competitor just had cuts. The natural tendency is to spiral into worry.
You start spending hours trying to read the tea leaves, right? Analyzing the CEO's emails, refreshing stock tickers, checking LinkedIn for clues, endlessly discussing what-ifs with colleagues.
Exactly. All that mental energy, all that time is focused squarely on the uncontrollable factor, the final decision by leadership about whether or not to restructure or lay people off. That decision is external. It's not up to us as employees.
Okay, so applying the dichotomy of control here, what does that look like practically?
It means consciously recognizing, okay, the layoff decision itself is outside my control. Acknowledging that frees up the energy currently being wasted, literally stolen by worry and speculation.
So you stop obsessing about the possibility of being laid off.
And you pivot that energy, redirect it entirely towards the factors that are within your control. What can you actually influence?
Okay, so your performance in your current role, definitely. Developing new skills, maybe getting certifications that make you more valuable, networking proactively, perhaps.
Absolutely. Building your professional relationships, updating your resume. Critically, as Trenton would likely emphasize, building a financial safety net, saving money, understanding your expenses. These are all concrete actions within your sphere of influence.
So it's a shift from passive worry to active preparation.
That's the reclamation of power right there. You stop feeling like a potential victim of circumstance, of macroeconomic trends, and you become an active agent shaping your own professional resilience and future options. It's not giving up, it's channeling energy effectively.
That makes so much sense. It's about focusing your resources where they actually make a difference. Okay, so that handles the external focus. But Trenton then moves us inward to the internal battlefield. This brings us to non-judgmental thinking.
Yes, and this is absolutely crucial, especially for the kind of analytical, high-achieving person we imagine listening, someone who's often very good at critical thinking, but maybe turns that critical lens inward a bit too harshly.
The inner judge, that voice that seems to narrate every mistake, every imperfection, and blows it completely out of proportion.
It's the voice that equates a slip-up with a fundamental flaw in your character. You know, I made a mistake on that report, therefore I am incompetent. Or, I said the wrong thing in that meeting, therefore I am socially awkward and everyone thinks I'm an idiot.
It's so automatic sometimes, that leap from behavior to identity. So Trenton's strategy is to replace that punitive inner judge with, what did you call it earlier? Gentle curiosity.
Gentle curiosity. And it sounds lovely, but what does it actually feel like? How do you do it in the moment when that judge is yelling?
Yeah, it's definitely harder than just saying the words.
It requires active cognitive reframing. It's like intercepting the thought before it lands and poisons the well. So, let's take your example. You botch part of a crucial presentation.
Okay, immediate reaction. Oh my God, I'm terrible at this. I've ruined everything. My boss is going to be furious.
Right. That's the inner judge on autopilot. Non-judgmental thinking or gentle curiosity steps in and says something like, okay, I'm noticing the thought that I'm terrible and ruined everything. Is that 100% objectively true?
Probably not.
Likely not. Then the curiosity kicks in. What specific parts of the presentation felt less effective? Why? Did my preparation play a role? Was I nervous? What feedback did I actually receive versus what I imagine people are thinking? What can I learn from this outcome to improve next time?
So you're shifting from this global, catastrophic self-condemnation, I am a failure, to a specific, objective process evaluation. That particular attempt had some weak points I can analyze and address.
Precisely. And that shift, that subtle distinction, is what allows for what Trenton calls that tender breakthrough of self-compassion. You start treating yourself like a scientist studying data, or like a kind mentor guiding a student, rather than a harsh judge passing a final sentence.
You're treating yourself as a work in progress, a learning organism, not some finished product that's either perfect or trash.
Exactly. But we should probably address the common pushback here, right? The fear that if you stop judging yourself harshly, you'll just lose your edge, become complacent.
Yeah, definitely. If I'm too gentle with myself, won't I just stop trying hard? Isn't that harsh critic what motivates me?
It's a valid concern, but Trenton argues, and a lot of psychology backs this up, that harsh judgment is actually demotivating in the long run. It's punitive, it creates fear and shame, and it makes you risk-averse. You become afraid to try new things because you dread reinforcing that negative self-judgment.
So the fear of the critic's voice actually leads to inaction or playing it safe.
Often, yes. Gentle curiosity, on the other hand, is inherently motivational. If you can look at a mistake or a failure objectively without the crushing weight of self-blame, you can extract the lessons much more easily. You're free to iterate, to experiment, to try again, because failure is just data, not a verdict on your worth. It lowers the stakes on imperfection.
That makes sense. Removing the shame allows for more learning. Okay, so we've got the dichotomy of control for external focus, non-judgmental thinking for internal critique. What's the next piece in this first chapter?
The third key tool is self-distancing. This is really the technique for managing that constant stream of internal noise. The thoughts, the worries, the anxieties that seem to pop up constantly.
Creating space, right, between you and the thought itself.
Exactly. It's about learning to view your own cognitive processes, your thoughts, feelings, sensations as transient phenomena. They are events happening in your awareness, not the definition of who you are.
I love Trenton's metaphor here, the one about clouds. He says we need to see thoughts as passing clouds, just drifting through the sky of our awareness, rather than getting caught inside a storm cloud that completely owns us.
That's a perfect way to put it. Usually we identify so closely with our thoughts. A worried thought pops up and bam, we feel worried. An angry thought, we feel angry. It's like the thought and the feeling and our sense of self are all fused together.
So self-distancing is the act of unfusing.
Yes. It's shifting your perspective. Instead of being the passenger in the thought car, tossed around by every turn, you become the observer standing on the sidewalk, watching the car drive by. You notice it, maybe you note its color and speed, but you don't get in.
How does that work with really persistent anxiety, like those what-if spirals?
It's incredibly powerful there. So the catastrophic thought arises, let's say, what if I lose my job and can't pay my mortgage, will end up homeless? Instead of immediately buying into that narrative and letting the panic take over.
You step back and label it.
Exactly. You say to yourself internally something like, there is the financial catastrophe prediction thought. Or simply thinking about job loss. Just naming it, labeling it as a mental event creates immediate distance.
It breaks the identification, that feeling that the thought is reality.
It does. And Trenton suggests this transforms the entire experience of anxiety. Instead of anxiety feeling like the hostile, permanent host of your entire life, it becomes more like an unwelcome, temporary guest. You acknowledge its presence. Okay, anxiety thought is here. You don't necessarily engage it in a big debate. You just let it be there, knowing it will eventually pass, like a cloud.
Let's apply that to those big U.S. financial worries we mentioned, student loans, medical debts, saving for retirement. Those thoughts can feel overwhelming, like the debt itself defines your whole future.
Absolutely. The thought spiral might sound like, this debt is insurmountable, I'll never pay it off, my life is ruined. It feels incredibly real and all-consuming.
But using self-distancing, you'd recognize that thought, my life is ruined, as a mental projection, often a worst-case scenario, maybe even fueled by societal pressures or past experiences. It's separate from the objective reality.
Right. The objective reality might be, I have X amount of debt, my current income is Y, my plan is Z. The thought is transient, emotional static, the action plan drafting a budget, exploring repayment options, seeking financial counseling, that's the controllable, objective part you can focus on. Even while the anxious thought is still making noise in the background, you maintain objectivity amidst the emotional storm.
So this first chapter, it really lays the groundwork for everything else. It's about identifying where your true power lies in your responses, your choices, your focus, not in trying to wrestle the uncontrollable into submission.
It's a fundamental reorientation, a liberation, really.
And Trenton's concluding thought for chapter 1 really sums it up beautifully. Letting go isn't about loss. It's not apathy. It's not weakness. It is, as he says, the bold art of choosing peace over perfection.
It's active, it's courageous, and it's the essential first move towards reclaiming your inner freedom, shifting from that constant state of exhaustion to one of engaged presence.
Okay, that first spark of freedom, just understanding these concepts, it feels pretty electrifying already.
Yeah.
And we are really just getting started here. If you're finding value in this breakdown, if these ideas are resonating, please do take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. It helps others find this deep dive, and we really appreciate the support. We'll continue now right into Chapter 2. Welcome back. We're moving into Chapter 2 of Nick Trenton's The Art of Letting Go, and this one takes us even deeper into our internal landscape. We're confronting maybe the most common source of our daily stress, that relentless voice of the inner critic.
Yeah, the chapter hook really nails it. What if the harshest words you hear are your own? Trenton frames this part of the journey as being like ripping off a bandage. You know, there might be a moment of discomfort as you confront this voice directly, but the liberation that follows is profound.
So the inner critic, it's that echo chamber of inadequacy, right? The voice that nitpicks every single thing you do, every decision, making sure you feel perpetually substandard, like you're never quite measuring up.
Exactly. It's constantly comparing you, usually unfavorably, to some impossible standard or to other people. And Trenton's core strategy here isn't just to ignore it, because that rarely works. It demands active confrontation.
What does that look like? Talking back to yourself.
Essentially, yes. But not just arguing with it defensively. It's about learning to talk back with what Trenton calls evidence-based kindness. You counter the critic's often vague, hyperbolic accusations with specific, factual, and compassionate truths.
Okay, give me an example. Let's say the critic pops up after a social event. You were so awkward tonight. You hardly said anything. Everyone probably thinks you're boring.
Right. So the active confrontation, the talking back, might sound like this internally. Okay, I am noticing the thought that I was awkward and boring. Was I completely silent? No, I had conversations with person A and person B. Maybe I was quieter than usual because I was tired, and that's okay. Being quiet doesn't automatically mean boring. I enjoyed listening. You're correcting the distortions with reality.
So it's like fact-checking the critic's negativity with actual evidence, but also adding that layer of self-compassion. It's okay that I was tired.
Precisely. It's not about pretending you were perfect. It's about replacing the harsh judgment with a more balanced and kind assessment of the situation. It takes practice, like building a muscle, but it chips away at the critic's power.
And Trent specifically connects the intensity of this inner critic to our modern environment, doesn't he? He mentions our scroll-heavy 2025.
He does, and it's such a critical point. He argues that the inner critic used to be somewhat localized, maybe fueled by family dynamics or your immediate peer group. But now, thanks to social media, endless news cycles, curated online personas, comparison is literally, as he says, just a swipe away.
So that internal voice of not good enough is getting constant reinforcement from the outside. We're comparing our messy reality to everyone else's carefully crafted highlight reel.
Exactly. It creates this manufactured feeling of lack, this pervasive sense that everyone else has it figured out, that their lives are smoother, happier, more successful. The inner critic thrives on that external comparison fuel.
So the tools Trenton offers are almost like a digital detox for the soul, as the outline suggested, helping us neutralize that internal voice that feeds on the external noise.
That's a great way to put it. By learning to challenge the critic directly, you build internal resilience against that external comparison pressure. And as that self-doubt starts to crack, as you weaken the critic's hold, something else can emerge. A quieter, stronger, more authentic inner voice. The voice of your actual values, your real strengths, your genuine self, underneath all the critical noise.
And having that stronger, quieter voice seems essential for the next big concept in this chapter, which feels truly revolutionary, changing perfectionism to excellentism.
This is a huge one. It's about fundamentally redefining what success and ambition mean to us.
Okay, I admit, when I first read that, I wondered, isn't excellentism just like a nicer sounding word for perfectionism.
Mhm.
How are they really all that different in practice?
It's a common question, and the distinction is absolutely crucial. Trenton lays it out very clearly. Perfectionism at its root is driven by fear.
Fear of what?
Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of making mistakes, fear of not being seen as flawless. It demands an impossible standard, zero errors, perfect outcomes every single time.
Which, as we discussed with the inner critic, is inherently paralyzing, right?
Yeah.
If any mistake feels like a catastrophe, like proof of your inadequacy, you'll avoid risks. You won't try things where you might fail. You stagnate.
Precisely. Perfectionism focuses almost entirely on the gap between your current reality and that unattainable ideal, which just breeds anxiety and self-criticism. Excellentism, on the other hand, is rooted in something different.
What's its root?
Ambition, yes, but ambition combined with forgiveness. It encourages striving, setting high goals, pushing yourself, but it also embraces the learning process, which inherently involves missteps and setbacks.
So excellentism celebrates progress, not just the final, flawless product.
Exactly. The focus shifts from avoiding flaws at all costs to maximizing learning and growth. It reframes mistakes not as failures of character, but as valuable data points. And the moment you internalize that, the moment you realize that good enough isn't a cop-out, but actually a necessary stage for iteration and improvement, that's when joy can actually start to bubble up in the process.
Let's connect this to that high-pressure U.S. context again. Think about entrepreneurs or creatives or even high-achieving students. There's often this immense pressure for overnight success, for the unicorn startup, the debut novel that's instantly a bestseller, the perfect GPA.
That's the narrative of destructive perfectionism right there. It sets an unrealistic, often luck-dependent benchmark. And if you don't hit it immediately, the inner critic declares the whole endeavor a failure. Game over.
And that can shut people down for years, right?
Yeah.
Fear of repeating that failure.
Absolutely. Excellentism, however, aligns much more closely with concepts that are also celebrated maybe more quietly in those same fields, like failing fast in tech, or the iterative design process, or the writer doing multiple drafts.
So it's about the minimum viable product, the prototype,
Yep.
the messy first draft, accepting the imperfections as part of the journey towards something better.
Exactly. You launch the MVP, knowing it has flaws, but you launch it to get feedback. You write the messy draft to get the ideas down. The failure of the first version isn't a final verdict. It's essential input for version 2.0. It turns ambition from this crushing weight into a sustainable engine for growth. Failure becomes fuel, not a full stop.
Wow. Changing that internal definition from perfectionism to excellentism feels like it could unlock so much energy and reduce so much anxiety.
It's a fundamental mindset shift. And it naturally leads into the next practice Trent discusses, non-attachment.
Okay, non-attachment. This is another one that can sound a bit passive. Like, if you're not attached to the outcome, does that mean you just don't care?
That's the common misconception, and Trenton is careful to clarify. Non-attachment isn't apathy. It's not about not caring, and it's definitely not passive resignation. It's about releasing the death grip on specific outcomes.
The death grip. Yeah, we live in a very outcome-obsessed world, don't we? The final grade, the quarterly numbers, the promotion, the follower count.
Constantly. And Trenton argues that true peace, true presence, resides not in achieving a specific outcome, which, remember, the dichotomy of control is often outside our full control anyway, but in fully engaging with the process itself, here and now.
So how does non-attachment work in practice? If I'm working really hard on a project, how do I remain unattached to its success?
It's about distinguishing effort from outcome. Non-attachment means you commit fully to the things you can control. Your preparation, your effort, your intention, the quality of your work during the process, you give it your absolute best.
Okay, so the input is 100%.
Yes, but, and this is the key, you consciously release the need for the universe or the market or other people to respond in the exact way you expect or desire. You accept that the outcome is influenced by many factors beyond your control.
It's that powerful metaphor again, the one about the river. You're watching the leaves drift on the current instead of desperately try to fight against it.
Right. You still have to row your boat, you take action, you make decisions, you navigate, but you accept the river's fundamental nature, its speed, its direction, the rocks, the bends. You work with the current of reality rather than exhausting yourself trying to force it to go your way. That acceptance is where the profound ease comes from.
It's shifting the internal monologue from this project must succeed or I'm a failure to something more like I am going to pour my best effort into this process, learn everything I can, and respond adaptively to whatever outcome emerges.
Exactly. You detach your sense of self-worth from the specific result. The value lies in the effort, the learning, the engagement itself.
Okay, that requires a lot of trust, though. Trust in yourself to handle whatever comes.
It does. And trust that even unexpected outcomes can lead to valuable learning or new opportunities. But to cultivate and protect that internal state of non-attachment, that quieter mind, Trenton emphasizes a very practical external step:
Which is,
curating your media consumption.
back to the external environment. This feels non-negotiable today.
Totally. Trenton argues that if you do all this hard internal work, silencing the critic, practicing excellentism, cultivating non-attachment, but then you immediately flood your brain with external inputs that trigger envy, outrage, anxiety, and comparison,
Yeah.
you're basically sabotaging yourself.
You're undoing the internal work with external junk food for the mind.
Precisely. So this isn't just about vaguely limiting screen time. It's about making conscious, mindful choices about what information, what voices, what images you allow into your mental space.
So practically, that means maybe unfollowing accounts that consistently make you feel bad about yourself, muting keywords related to topics that just cause you anxiety, actively seeking out sources that are informative, constructive, maybe even uplifting.
Yes, all of the above. It's about shifting from passive consumption, just letting the algorithm feed you whatever keeps you scrolling, to active curation. Choosing inputs that nurture growth and clarity, rather than sources that thrive on conflict, sensationalism, or fear-mongering.
Think about the impact of constantly consuming polarizing news cycles, or certain social media platforms where comparison and conflict seem baked into the design. It makes maintaining that non-judgmental, non-attached internal state almost impossible if you're marinating in it all day.
Right. So by setting these external boundaries, by deliberately choosing selective silence in certain areas, you create the mental space necessary for that internal clarity to actually emerge and take root. You're tending the garden, protecting the seeds you've planted.
So Chapter 2 really drives home that breaking free from negativity isn't about achieving some impossible state of perfect inner silence or shutting out the world entirely. It's more about learning to amplify your own resilient, authentic inner voice above the noise.
It's like consciously choosing which radio station to tune into inside your head, rewriting that internal playlist from one of disaster and inadequacy to one of resilience and possibility.
A fundamental and necessary overhaul, as you said earlier. That concept of excellentism, just that shift alone, feels revolutionary for anyone feeling caught in the relentless hustle culture. If you found that shift as powerful as we did, please help us share this insight. Take a moment to hit that like, subscribe, and share button before we move on to Chapter 3. We really appreciate you helping get this deep dive out there. All right, we're moving into Chapter 3 of The Art of Letting Go. And this chapter tackles what might be the most pervasive and paralyzing force in modern life: uncertainty. That feeling of being stuck, maybe overwhelmed, thinking, I can't handle this, while the world just keeps spinning faster and faster.
Yeah, Trenton really tries to ignite a fire for change here. The goal isn't just to cope with uncertainty, but to actually transform our relationship with it, to see it less as a threat and more as fuel for growth, maybe even an adventure.
The core concept underpinning this is fully embracing change, not just tolerating it, but tackling that deep gut-twist feeling of uncertainty head-on. It requires a significant reframe.
Absolutely. The reframe is essential. Viewing uncertainty not as this fundamental danger to your stability, your plans, your identity, but as the unavoidable, maybe even necessary doorway to deeper living, to evolution, to finding out what you're really capable of.
And Trenton explicitly grounds this advice in the reality of our current world. He points directly to things like 2025's rapid shifts from AI shakeups to global resets. He's saying adaptability isn't just a nice-to-have soft skill anymore.
No, it's become the primary currency for survival and thriving. In a world that's constantly changing technologically, economically, socially, if you can't bend, if your mindset is too rigid, you're likely to break under the pressure.
So the approach has to shift from mourning the loss of perceived stability, which maybe never truly existed anyway.
Right, to almost celebrating novelty, or at least meeting it with curiosity instead of fear. The real emotional peak in this process, the transformation Trenton describes, is that moment when fear actually morphs into fuel.
How does that happen? Fear feels so visceral.
It does. But the electric thrill he talks about isn't the thrill of safety or predictability. It's the excitement that comes from being propelled forward by the unknown, by the challenge. It's like the difference between seeing a huge wave coming and feeling terrified it will drown you versus grabbing a surfboard and feeling the adrenaline rush of potentially riding it.
Okay, let's make this concrete with that U.S. example about career upheaval. We touched on AI disruption earlier, fields like copywriting, coding, customer service, graphic design. Many professionals are facing this deep fear of their skills becoming obsolete.
Exactly. The fear-based response, the rigid mindset, is to cling desperately to the old ways, to deny the shift is happening, maybe complain about it, or just freeze in panic and catastrophize about becoming unemployable.
That feels like a very understandable reaction, though.
It's understandable, but ultimately unhelpful. The resilient response, the one informed by Trenton's principles of embracing change, is to see that uncertainty not as an end, but as a signal to adapt.
So instead of wasting energy mourning the way things used to be.
You immediately pivot to adaptability as your primary strategy. You use the uncertainty as fuel for action. You start asking different questions. Okay, this is happening. What new skills are becoming valuable now? How can I leverage AI tools instead of fearing them? What are the uniquely human skills like creativity, strategic thinking, empathy, complex problem solving that technology can't easily replicate? Where are the new opportunities emerging from this shift?
So the job displacement or the industry shift isn't seen as a personal failure or a dead end. It's reframed as a necessary reset, a catalyst forcing you to evolve and potentially discover new strengths or interests. The uncertainty didn't break you. It prompted growth.
Exactly. It forces you out of your comfort zone, which is often where the most significant learning happens. But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
sustained evolution, sustained adaptability requires mental bandwidth. It requires clarity. And that's often impossible when your mind is just completely cluttered with worry and overwhelm.
Which brings us directly to the next tool in this chapter,
Mm.
the incredibly simple yet potentially seismic practice, as Trenton calls it, of brain dumping.
Yes, this is so practical. Our brains, as you said earlier, are amazing processors, fantastic at making connections and generating ideas. But they are terrible storage lockers, especially for anxieties and unprocessed tasks.
Trying to keep everything in your head. It just leads to that feeling of constant low-grade panic, like you're definitely forgetting something important.
Right. The cognitive load becomes overwhelming. The brain dump is designed specifically to offload that mental clutter. And for the kind of highly informed analytical learner we're talking to, who probably has a lot of information and ideas swirling around, this can be a game changer.
How does it work? It sounds simple, just write stuff down.
The mechanism is more powerful than it seems. Worry, in its raw state, is often abstract chaos. It's that vague feeling, ugh, I have so much to do, I'm overwhelmed, I might fail, I forgot something. It's huge, shapeless, and paralyzing.
Yeah, it just hangs over you like a cloud.
The brain dump forces you to take that abstract chaos and translate it into concrete externalized items. You get it out of your head and onto paper or screen. The first step is just dumping. No filtering, no organizing yet. Just write down every single thing that's taking up mental space, tasks, worries, ideas, reminders, frustrations. Everything.
I've tried this, and yeah, the first few minutes can feel like just pure chaotic fear spilling onto the page. Little things, big things, it's all mixed up.
And that's perfect. That's the point of stage 1, externalization. Get the raw noise out. Then comes stage 2, triage and organization. You look at the list objectively.
Okay, so what do you do with the list?
You start sorting. Which of these items are actual actionable tasks, which are just vague worries or anxieties? Those might need different tools, like self-distancing. Which items, crucially, belong on that dichotomy of uncontrollable list? You might realize half the things you dumped are things you can't actually do anything about.
That alone must be free.
Hugely. And then, for the actionable items, the key is to identify the very next physical step. Not the whole project, just the immediate next action. Call Bob, draft outline, research vendors, schedule meeting, something small and concrete.
So you're breaking down the overwhelming into the manageable.
Exactly. You're turning that paralyzing cloud of abstract worry into a clear, prioritized list of specific next steps. And the relief that follows this process, Trenton describes it as this exhale of an empty mind.
It's like you physically cleared out space in your head.
You have. And that mental space is absolutely essential for calm decision making, for creativity, for focused work, for actually embracing change instead of just reacting to it. Without that regular clearing out, every new email, every new request, every new worry just gets piled onto the existing internal mess, compounding the stress.
So the brain dump directly combats that feeling of being overwhelmed by reducing the cognitive load.
Yeah.
You stop your brain from trying to juggle 50 different open loops simultaneously.
Precisely. You convert the looping anxiety into a plan.
Okay, so Chapter 3 really gives us the tools for resilience. It's about reframing uncertainty through embracing change and managing the internal chaos that prevents adaptation through brain dumping. It's about cultivating a mindset that can bend with the winds of change instead of snapping.
Trenton's point is that this growth mindset isn't just some feel-good cliche. It's a quiet revolution, as he puts it, that genuinely turns stuck into soaring. This chapter feels like the steady hand we all need when feeling rattled by the pace of modern life.
Absolutely. Turning that mental chaos into clear, actionable steps feels essential for anyone wanting to move forward with purpose. If you appreciate the depth of this analysis and how these tools connect, please hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Help us reach more learners. Up next, a really powerful chapter. We're handing you the editor's pen to rewrite your own history in Chapter 4.
Welcome back. We're diving into Chapter 4 of The Art of Letting Go, and this one is profound. It deals with memory, identity, and the powerful, often subconscious grip of the past. Our minds, as Trenton points out, have this tendency to get stuck looping old stories, tales of hurt, failure, regret, that keep us from living fully in the present and defining ourselves by our potential.
Yeah, it's like we're constantly viewing the present through the filter of past experiences, often negative ones. And Trenton's core message here is empowering. He essentially says we can become the editors of our own life stories. We can choose which narratives to keep reinforcing and which ones to gently release.
The process starts with a crucial first step: identifying and letting go of negative self-scripts. These are the looping lies, as Trenton calls them, that we tell ourselves, often without even realizing it. They act like an invisible fence or an inner ceiling, limiting what we believe we're capable of or deserve.
Can you give some examples of common negative self-scripts?
Oh, they're so common. Things like, I'm not smart enough, I always mess things up, I'm unlovable, good things don't happen to people like me, I'll never be financially secure, I'm just not a confident person. These scripts often get cemented in childhood, maybe through specific experiences or messages we received, or perhaps after a significant failure or trauma later in life.
And we just keep living by them, sometimes for decades, even if our current reality contradicts them.
Exactly, they become part of our assumed identity. So, Trenton's approach isn't just about noticing the script, it's about active intervention, conscious substitution.
How does that work? You can't just tell yourself the opposite and expect to believe it, right?
Right. It's more nuanced than simple affirmations, though those can play a role. First, you have to identify the specific negative script that's running. Then you try to trace its origin. When did you start believing this? What experiences seem to prove it true? Understanding the source can sometimes lessen its power.
Okay, so awareness first. Then what?
Then comes the active flipping, the substitution. You need to craft a new, empowering truth, one that is actually supported by evidence from your life, even small pieces of evidence. So if the script is, I always fail when it matters, you actively search for counter-evidence. Okay, I didn't get that promotion, but I successfully completed X project, I learned Y skill, I received positive feedback on Z task. You build a case for the new belief.
So you're consciously gathering proof for a different, more empowering narrative about yourself.
Precisely. And Trenton emphasizes that this isn't just pop psychology. He notes this work is backed by therapy insights tailored for busy lives. He's distinguishing it from quick fix apps or superficial advice. This is deeper, foundational work on your self-narrative. It takes consistent effort, like gently carving a new path through dense forest. You're chipping away at decades of ingrained belief pattern.
And the payoff for that consistent effort.
Trenton describes it as this profound emotional shift, the hinge moment. It's that internal dawning of self-belief, like, as he says, sunlight breaking through fog. When you successfully interrupt that looping lie, even just for a moment, and replace it with a more accurate, compassionate truth, you fundamentally shift your stance. You move from feeling like a victim defined by the past script to feeling like the agent capable of writing the next chapter.
From passenger to editor, I like that. This connects really well to the second major tool in this chapter, which sounds fascinating: externalization, drawing from narrative therapy.
Yes, externalization is perhaps one of the most powerful techniques for loosening the grip of painful past experiences. The core idea, drawn directly from narrative therapy pioneers like Michael White and David Epstein, is learning to treat problems, including painful memories, past failures, even diagnoses as separate entities outside of yourself.
So instead of saying, I am depressed, you might say, I am currently struggling with depression.
Exactly. Or instead of, I'm a failure because my business failed, you'd frame it as, I experienced a business failure. The language shift is subtle but incredibly significant. It separates the person from the problem. The problem becomes something you have or something you're dealing with, not something you are.
The problem is the problem. The person is not the problem. I think I've heard that phrase.
That's the mantra of narrative therapy. The ultimate goal here is to change your relationship with a difficult memory or the past event. If you internalize it, if you fuse your identity with it, it controls you. The shame, the regret, the anger associated with that event becomes you,
Like carrying it around constantly.
like carrying it inside you. Externalization allows you to, metaphorically, put it down on the table in front of you. You can look at it, examine it, understand its effects, but it's separate. It happened to you or you experienced it, but it doesn't define your core essence.
So using that business failure example again,
Yeah.
how does externalization help beyond just changing the language?
It allows for a more objective analysis. When the failure is out there instead of in here, you can explore it more freely. You can ask questions like, what factors contributed to this failure? What were the external market conditions? Uncontrollable. What were my specific actions or decisions? Controllable. What skills did I lack then? What have I learned since? How did this failure try to trick me into believing I'm incompetent? You're interviewing the problem, not identifying with it.
It gives you perspective. It allows you to see it as just one event, one chapter in a much longer book.
Precisely. Trenton emphasizes that this process leads to a profound sense of liberation. Yesterday's weight, which felt like the whole story, is reduced to just a chapter, not the book. A chapter you might not have chosen, but one you learned from and ultimately get to decide how it influences the rest of the narrative.
Let's think about how this applies in that U.S. identity context. We often see people heavily defined or defining themselves by past traumas, maybe childhood difficulties, academic setbacks, relationship betrayals, or those professional failures we discussed. These events become central to their identity narrative.
Absolutely. And externalization offers a path out of that. Take someone whose parents were highly critical. The internalized scripts might be, I'm never good enough. Externalization helps them see the critical voice as something that influenced them, something they encountered, maybe even something they internalized for protection back then, but it is not who they are.
So they can acknowledge the impact of that criticism without letting it define their current worth or potential.
Exactly. They can appreciate the lessons learned, maybe even develop compassion for why their parents were that way. Perspective taking, which we'll get to. But they don't have to carry the shame or the not good enough label as their core identity today. They get to define themselves based on their current actions, values, and resilience, not just by the weight of that historical experience.
This chapter feels like it's really about reclaiming agency over your own story.
That's the heart of it. Trenton's final message here is deeply empowering. We have the capacity and maybe even the responsibility to narrate our own lives with grace, with self-compassion. The real breakthrough comes when we recognize that the stories we consciously choose to release the old scripts, the internalized failures, are what create the vital space needed for the new stories, the ones actually worth living, to emerge.
It's essential reading for anyone who feels haunted by what was, or defined by a past they didn't choose.
The ultimate act of self-editing, indeed.
Wow. That is truly giving the listener the power, the actual tools to edit their own life story. If you've found courage or hope in these ideas about rewriting the past, we sincerely ask that you like, subscribe, and share this deep dive. Help us empower others. We're approaching the final, crucial chapter now, focusing on forgiveness and moving forward. Okay, we've arrived at the fifth and final major theme, the concluding movement in Nick Trenton's The Art of Letting Go. This chapter focuses on how we navigate our relationships with others and with ourselves, particularly when hurt or resentment is involved. The source hook puts it perfectly. Holding grudges is like carrying bricks uphill, utterly exhausting.
Right. So this finale is all about lightening that interpersonal load. It's about moving beyond past hurts and building connections both with others and within ourselves that are genuinely healing and allow for forward motion.
Where does Trenton suggest we start with this? It feels like a big topic.
He argues the critical, necessary starting point before even tackling things like forgiveness is a very practical strategy, learning to break free from toxic people by setting boundaries. You need to establish safety and self-preservation first.
Boundaries. That word comes up so much these days, but it can still feel really difficult to implement, can it? There's often that immediate wave of guilt.
Oh, absolutely. We worry about offending people, being seen as selfish, damaging the relationship, maybe facing backlash. It's deeply ingrained for many of us to prioritize others' comfort over our own needs.
So how does Trenton help us reframe boundaries to overcome that guilt?
He positions boundaries not as acts of aggression or punishment towards others, but as essential acts of self-affirmation and self-protection. They are about honoring the peace and stability you've been working to cultivate through the other practices in the book. It's about saying, this is my space, my emotional space, my mental space, my time, and I have the right to protect it.
So it's less about pushing people away and more about defining where you end and they begin, protecting your own well-being.
Exactly, and Trenton's wisdom here really reflects the broader cultural conversation happening right now. As the outline noted, we're seeing this rise of mental health boundaries in pop culture and therapy. In our hyper-connected, always-on world where digital access means demands can be constant, learning to set limits isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for mental health.
Okay, let's walk through a really common, often high-stress U.S. example. How do you set boundaries in complex family dynamics, especially during holidays? Or how about dealing with that overly demanding boss or client who emails you at all hours?
Great examples. In these scenarios, the boundary might be verbal or behavioral. With a relentlessly critical relative, maybe the boundary is a calmly stated script you practiced beforehand. Mom, Dad, Aunt Sue, I appreciate you care, but my career choice, parenting style, relationship status are not up for discussion right now. Let's talk about something else.
Okay, direct but polite. What about the demanding boss?
The boundary might be behavioral. You make a conscious choice not to check or respond to emails after a certain hour or on weekends, unless it's a pre-agreed emergency. Maybe you communicate that expectation clearly. I'll respond to your email first thing Monday morning. Or you set an out-of-office reply. The boundary is protecting your personal time.
That initial act of setting the boundary might still feel uncomfortable, maybe even cause some external friction initially.
It might, but Trenton emphasizes the internal result. It's that feeling of bold freedom, as he calls it, that feeling of no more. It's the mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical act of stepping back into space that is rightfully yours. You're reclaiming your energy, your focus, and defining the terms of engagement. You decide what level of access others have to your inner peace.
That makes sense. You need that safe container first.
Yeah.
Once those necessary boundaries are established, or at least being worked on, where does Trenton guide us next?
Once you've created that safer space, you're better equipped to address the deeper, often more complex work of learning to forgive. And this applies not just to forgiving others who have hurt you, but also, crucially, forgiving yourself for past mistakes or perceived failings.
Forgiveness. That's another huge concept. What's Trenton's take? Is it about forgetting what happened, excusing bad behavior?
No, and that's a critical distinction he makes. Forgiveness in Trenton's framework is not passive acceptance. It's a deliberate, active, often multi-step process. It is absolutely not synonymous with forgetting the offense, condoning the behavior, or even necessarily reconciling with the person.
Okay, so if it's not forgetting or excusing, what is it?
At its core, it's about canceling the emotional debt. When someone hurts us or when we feel we failed ourselves, we often carry the sense that something is owed: an apology, restitution, punishment, justice. Forgiveness is the conscious choice to release that claim. You decide to stop demanding payment on that emotional debt, primarily because you recognize the only person still suffering from holding on to that demand is you.
You stop paying the mental and emotional interest on a debt that might never get repaid anyway.
Beautifully put. You choose to release yourself from the burden of carrying that resentment, that bitterness, that anger. And the result, Trenton argues, is transformative. You stop pouring energy into the past wound and instead turn that energy towards internal bridge building.
Bridge building.
Yes, building bridges back to your own peace. Releasing bitterness allows compassion to enter, maybe not immediately for the other person, but certainly for yourself, for the pain you experienced. And as that compassion, even just self-compassion, begins to bloom, it eases the ache of those old wounds. It frees up an enormous amount of mental and emotional real estate that was previously occupied by the grudge.
So forgiveness is ultimately an act of self-care, of self-liberation.
Primarily, yes. While it can sometimes open the door to reconciliation with others, its fundamental purpose in this context is to free you.
Okay, that's a powerful reframe. Now, within forgiveness, Trenton offers a very specific, maybe more intellectually demanding tool, letting go of resentment through perspective taking.
Yes, this is a sophisticated technique, and it can be challenging, but it's incredibly effective for dissolving lingering anger and fostering genuine empathy, which is often the key to unlocking forgiveness.
My immediate reaction, again, is resistance. If someone genuinely wronged me, why should I expend energy trying to see things from their perspective? Doesn't that somehow invalidate my own pain or excuse their actions?
That's the crucial nuance Trenton wants us to understand. Perspective taking is not about excusing the harmful behavior. It's not about saying, oh, it was okay what they did. It's about attempting to understand the motivation or the context behind their behavior.
Why is that helpful?
Because often, when we can glimpse the why behind someone's hurtful actions, we realize it wasn't actually about us. The mechanism is recognizing that hurtful behavior frequently stems from the other person's own pain, their own limitations, their fears, their insecurities, their ignorance, their unhealed wounds.
So their lashing out was more about their internal state than it was a calculated attack specifically aimed at me.
Frequently, yes. That doesn't make the impact on you any less real, but understanding the source can depersonalize the injury. It shifts the narrative from, they intentionally attacked me because I'm flawed, to something like, their own deep insecurity caused them to react defensively and lash out in my direction.
That shift from feeling personally targeted to understanding it as a reflection of their issues, I can see how that would reduce the emotional charge. It breaks the cycle of resentment because the story changes.
Exactly. It unlocks a deeper, more connected sense of calm because you're no longer locked in a purely adversarial stance. And for the listener, the learner, who values understanding things from multiple angles, this technique is presented as a powerful tool for liberation. By stepping into another's shoes, even briefly and hypothetically, you gain understanding. And understanding fosters empathy, which ultimately sets everyone free, the person you were resenting, the resentment itself, and most importantly, you.
It dissolves the glue holding the grudge together.
A great way to think about it. So this final chapter really brings everything together. Setting boundaries protects your present peace, while forgiveness, particularly through perspective taking, heals the past wounds that still drain your energy.
And the final takeaway Trenton leaves us with is this incredibly hopeful, forward-looking declaration. Moving beyond hurt isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's not about forgetting. It is the active, conscious decision of choosing a horizon wide with possibility.
You acknowledge the past, you learn from it, you heal what needs healing, and then you deliberately turn your focus towards the future you want to create. The healing truly begins the moment you decide you're no longer willing to carry the weight of the past into that future. You put the bricks down and look ahead.
Wow, what a comprehensive, truly practical guide to achieving internal freedom. If you found release, or maybe just a path towards release in these chapters and these ideas, please do remember to like, subscribe, and share this deep dive. Help spread these tools. And please stay with us for just a couple more minutes for our final thoughts. #tag outro.
What an incredible journey, really, stepping through the core principles of Nick Trenton's The Art of Letting Go. We've covered so much ground, moving from that fundamental understanding of the dichotomy of control back in Chapter 1, really nailing down where to focus our energy.
Yeah, learning to distinguish what's ours to shape and what isn't. Then Chapter 2 was all about silencing that harsh inner critic, wasn't it? And embracing that idea of excellentism, striving for progress with self-compassion, instead of getting crushed by impossible perfectionism.
And Chapter 3 gave us those vital tools for building resilience in the face of constant change, embracing change as an opportunity and using practical things like brain dumping to turn that mental chaos into clear, manageable steps.
Then we got into the really deep work in Chapter 4, rewriting the past, using techniques like externalization to ensure that yesterday's struggles become lessons learned, just chapters, not the whole defining story of our lives.
And finally, here in Chapter 5, we explored those healing horizons. The necessity of setting firm, guilt-free boundaries to protect our peace, and the truly liberating power of forgiveness, both of others and, so importantly, of ourselves, often unlocked through perspective taking.
It really feels like a complete toolkit. And the core message that resonates throughout, especially for you, the learner listening right now, is that letting go isn't passive. It's this active, sophisticated, ongoing choice. It's choosing adaptability, choosing peace, choosing self-compassion over that exhausting, relentless, and ultimately futile pursuit of rigid control and perfection.
Absolutely. And this framework, these tools, they offer immense stability and resilience for navigating the sheer volatility of modern life. The technological shifts, the economic uncertainties, the constant pressure of comparison culture, the rapid pace of global events. It's about building an internal anchor.
That brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward today. We talked a lot about control, and we talked about self-distancing, viewing thoughts and feelings like anxiety as temporary guests passing through.
Right.
So, building on that, what would happen if you tried to apply that same technique, that same curious observation, to your own deep-seated need for control? What if you viewed that very urge, the need to manage everything, predict everything, prevent every negative outcome? What if you viewed that need itself as a kind of guest in your mind?
Don't fight it, don't judge it. Just observe it when it shows up.
Exactly. Acknowledge its presence. There's the need to control guest visiting again. Maybe it's a very familiar guest, one who's been staying in your mental house for a very, very long time.
And then, maybe gently, curiously ask it, what is your job here? What are you trying to do for me? What past wound, what old fear, what underlying insecurity is this intense need for control trying so hard to protect you from?
Because chances are that need, however burdensome it feels now, probably served a vital protective purpose at some point in your life. Maybe in childhood, maybe during a crisis. It stepped up to try and keep you safe in a situation that felt unsafe.
So can you recognize that? Can you perhaps even feel a little gratitude towards that part of you, towards that guest, for its original intention, for its tireless efforts to protect you back then?
Thank it for its service. Thank it for trying its best with the tools it had at the time. And then, gently, mindfully, see if you can guide it towards the door. Because the real freedom comes when you recognize that maybe, just maybe, you don't actually need that particular outdated form of protection anymore. You have new tools now. You have resilience.
You have the capacity to handle uncertainty differently now. Letting go of the need for control becomes possible when you trust your ability to navigate whatever comes.
That's a deep one to sit with.
It is. And that really brings us to the end of this deep dive into the art of letting go. Thank you so much for joining us, for investing your time and attention in this exploration.
We genuinely hope you walk away feeling a little lighter, maybe a bit more empowered, and definitely ready to start applying some of these incredibly liberating tools in your own life, starting today.